The water was rising fast, but Sarah Owens, our HOA president, stood there with bolt cutters in her hand and a satisfied smirk on her face. She'd just cut the power to our neighborhood's flood pumps during the worst storm we'd seen in decades. "Maybe next time you'll think twice before challenging my authority, John," she said, watching the water creep toward our foundations. What she didn't know was that I'd been preparing for this exact moment for months. See, when you're a retired electrical engineer with a grudge and unlimited time on your hands, you tend to plan ahead. Before we dive in, let me know where you're watching from today. My name is John Dale, and I've lived in Riverside Meadows for 12 years. It's a beautiful community of 847 homes, nestled in a valley that, unfortunately, floods during heavy rains. That's why the original developer installed an extensive pump system back in 2003, 6 industrial-grade pumps that could handle even the most severe weather. The system worked perfectly until Sarah Owens became HOA president 18 months ago. Sarah moved here from California with her tech executive husband, bringing that particular brand of entitlement that comes from never being told no. Within 6 months of taking office, she'd rewritten half our bylaws, installed security cameras at every entrance, and started treating the neighborhood like her personal kingdom. But her obsession with me started over something completely trivial: my mailbox. See, I had painted my mailbox forest green instead of the approved hunter green specified in the architectural guidelines. The difference? Maybe 2 shades, barely noticeable unless you held a color swatch directly next to it. Sarah noticed immediately. "Mr. Dale," she said during her first inspection of my property, "your mailbox is clearly non-compliant. You'll need to repaint it within 72 hours or face fines." I'd been dealing with HOAs long enough to know how to handle this. "Actually, Sarah, if you check Section 4, 2.7 of the Architectural Guidelines, it specifies forest green or similar earth tone variants. My mailbox qualifies as a similar earth tone variant." Her face flushed red. Nobody had ever challenged her interpretation before. "We'll see about that," she muttered, then marched back to her golf cart. 3 days later, I received a violation notice demanding I repaint the mailbox and pay a $150 fine for willful non-compliance. When I requested a hearing with the Architectural Review Committee, I discovered Sarah had disbanded it 2 weeks prior, claiming it was redundant since she could handle all approvals personally. That's when I knew I was dealing with someone dangerous. Over the following months, Sarah's harassment escalated. She cited me for parking my truck in my own driveway because it was commercial looking. It wasn't. She fined me for leaving my garbage can visible from the street for 6 hours after pickup. She even tried to force me to remove my vegetable garden, claiming it violated the aesthetic standards of the community. Each time, I documented everything: photos, timestamps, certified mail receipts. I also started attending every HOA board meeting, asking uncomfortable questions about our finances and Sarah's increasingly authoritarian rule changes. That's when I discovered the real problem. During one particularly heated meeting in October, I asked about the maintenance budget for our flood pump system. The pumps required annual inspections and periodic part replacements to function properly during storm season. "The pump system is adequately maintained," Sarah said dismissively. "But when was the last inspection?" I pressed. That's administrative detail that doesn't concern homeowners." I pulled out my phone and showed her the manufacturer's website. According to Hydrotech Industries, these Model X47 pumps require professional inspection every 6 months and full service annually. The last service record I can find is from March 2022. The room went silent. Several neighbors shifted uncomfortably. "The pumps are fine," Sarah snapped. "Meeting adjourned?" But they weren't fine. I spent the next week researching pump maintenance contracts and discovered that Sarah had canceled our service agreement with Hydrotech to save money for her pet projects, like the $15,000 monument sign at the main entrance and her proposed Community Beautification Initiative. 3 weeks later, Hurricane Miranda started forming in the Gulf. Miranda was predicted to stall over our area for 6-8 hours, dropping potentially record-breaking rainfall. The National Weather Service issued flood warnings for our entire county, I tried calling Sarah multiple times to discuss pump system preparations. She ignored my calls. I sent certified letters to the entire HOA board expressing my concerns about pump readiness. Only one person responded, board member Tom Hartley, who admitted he'd been asking Sarah about maintenance for months. "She keeps saying everything's handled," Tom told me privately. "But honestly, John, I don't think she understands how critical those pumps are." The night before Miranda hit, I made a decision that would change everything. I couldn't legally access the pump house. Sarah had changed the locks and installed a security camera, but I could prepare for what I was becoming convinced was inevitable failure. I spent $3,000 of my own money on backup equipment, portable pumps, generators, industrial extension cords, and enough fuel to run everything for 72 hours. I also reached out to my former colleagues at the electrical company, quietly arranging for emergency lighting equipment. Most importantly, I set up my own surveillance system, carefully positioned to document whatever was about to happen. Sarah Owens thought she'd won our little war over mailbox colors and architectural compliance. She had no idea the real battle was just beginning. Hurricane Miranda made landfall at 3 a.m. on November 15th, and by 6 a.m., it was clear this was going to be historic. Rain fell in sheets so thick you couldn't see across the street. The National Weather Service upgraded our flood warning to life-threatening status. I'd been up all night monitoring weather reports and checking our neighborhood's drainage systems. At 7:30 a.m., I put on my rain gear and walked to the pump house to assess the situation. What I found made my blood run cold. The main electrical panel was dark. No power indicators, no system status lights, nothing. Through the reinforced glass window, I could see water already beginning to pool in the lower sections of the pump house. Our 6 flood pumps, the only thing standing between 847 homes and catastrophic flooding, were completely offline. I immediately called Sarah's emergency number. It went straight to voicemail. I called Tom Hartley. "Tom, we've got a major problem. The pump system is down." "What do you mean, down?" "I mean, completely non-functional. No power, no backup systems running. Water's already starting to back up." "Jesus Christ. Let me try to reach Sarah." While Tom worked his contacts, I started implementing my emergency plan. I loaded my portable pumps and generators into my truck and began setting up temporary drainage points around our neighborhood's lowest areas. By 9 a.m., water was visibly rising in storm drains throughout Riverside Meadows. Several neighbors came out to help me deploy equipment, but it was clear my makeshift system couldn't handle the volume we were facing. That's when I saw Sarah's black Mercedes pulling up to the pump house. I watched through my binoculars as she got out, wearing designer rain boots and carrying what looked like a toolbox. She spent about 10 minutes inside the pump house, then emerged and drove away. 30 minutes later, the situation got infinitely worse. I was adjusting one of my portable pumps when I heard shouting from across the street. Mrs. Patterson, an elderly widow, was standing in her front yard pointing at water flowing into her garage. "John, the water's getting into my house." I ran over to help her move important items to higher ground, and that's when I noticed something that made me furious beyond words. The main power lines to the pump house were intact. The electrical infrastructure was completely undamaged by the storm. Whatever was keeping our pumps offline, it wasn't hurricane damage. At 11:47 a.m., my doorbell rang. Sarah Owens stood on my porch, somehow managing to look perfectly composed despite the biblical rainfall. Behind her were 2 men I didn't recognize, both wearing security company polo shirts. "John, I need to speak with you about your unauthorized use of pumping equipment." I stared at her through the screen door. "Unauthorized? Sarah, half our neighborhood is flooding because the official pumps aren't working." "The pump system is functioning within acceptable parameters," she said coldly. "Your deployment of unapproved drainage equipment is creating liability issues for the HOA." "Liability issues? People's homes are flooding. People's homes are flooding because they chose to live in a flood-prone area. That's not the HOA's responsibility." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Sarah, it's literally the HOA's responsibility. We pay fees specifically to maintain flood control systems." I am ordering you to cease all pumping operations immediately. These gentlemen will be monitoring to ensure compliance." She handed me an official-looking document, a cease and desist order, demanding I stop using unauthorized mechanical equipment on HOA property. "You're out of your mind if you think I'm stopping," I told her. Her smile was ice cold. "We'll see about that." 2 hours later, I discovered exactly what she meant. I was refueling one of my generators when the power died. Not just to my equipment, to my entire house. Looking down the street, I realized the power was out to the whole block. All the houses where neighbors had been helping me, supporting my emergency pumping efforts, or publicly criticizing Sarah's handling of the flood response. Our power had been cut. But here's the thing Sarah didn't know. When you spend 40 years as an electrical engineer, you develop certain skills and certain connections. I made 3 phone calls. The first was to my old supervisor at the power company, confirming that our outage wasn't storm-related. Someone had specifically requested service disconnection to selected addresses. The second was to my lawyer, putting him on standby for what was about to become a very interesting legal situation. The third was to my friend Marcus, who ran an electrical contracting company and owed me a favor from way back. "Marcus, I need emergency lighting equipment for about 12 houses. Can you be here in 2 hours?" "In this weather?" "John, that's crazy." "Marcus, trust me on this. Bring everything you've got." By 6 p.m., while Sarah's supporters enjoyed full electrical service, my entire block sat in darkness. But that was about to change dramatically. You see, there's something beautiful about being a retired engineer with a grudge, unlimited time, and friends in the electrical business. I'd been preparing for this moment for months. At 7:15 p.m., while Sarah Owens thought she'd finally broken me, I activated the most spectacular lighting display our neighborhood had ever seen. Marcus and his crew had arrived right on schedule with 3 industrial generators, enough cable to power a small city, and every piece of emergency lighting equipment they could fit in their trucks. Within 90 minutes, we'd transformed my powerless block into something that could be seen from space. Every house Sarah had targeted, 12 homes total, now blazed with industrial-grade floodlights. We're talking 50,000 lumen LED arrays, the kind they use for highway construction projects. Each house had enough illumination to light a football stadium. But the real masterpiece was my property. I'd installed motion-activated spotlights that tracked movement across my yard like a military installation. Solar-powered beacon lights flashed red and blue in synchronized patterns, and crowning it all, a massive digital billboard sign displaying a rotating message in letters 6 feet tall. HOA President Sarah Owens cut power to flood pumps during hurricane. Homes flooding while she plays politics. The sign was perfectly legal. I'd checked municipal codes extensively, and it was positioned to be visible from the main road leading into our neighborhood. By 8 p.m., cars were stopping to take pictures. By 9 p.m., local news crews arrived. Sarah's first response was predictably vindictive. She called the police, claiming I was creating a public nuisance and violating noise ordinances. Officer Martinez, who responded to the call, walked around my property carefully. "Mr. Dale, I have to admit, this is impressive, but I'm getting complaints about the brightness." "Officer, I'm simply providing emergency lighting during a power outage. Is there a specific ordinance I'm violating?" He checked his notes. "Well, no, not technically, but this seems excessive for emergency lighting." I gestured toward the flooded street. "Officer, our HOA president cut power to the flood pumps during a hurricane, then selectively shut off electricity to anyone who criticized her decision. My neighbors and I are dealing with flooding while she plays political games. This lighting ensures everyone can see what's happening." That's when Officer Martinez noticed something interesting. Sarah's house, 3 blocks away, still had full power. "Ma'am," he radioed to Sarah, "can you explain why some houses have power and others don't?" Even over the radio, her frustration was audible. That's a utility company issue. I don't control power distribution." But I had documentation proving otherwise. The next morning brought 2 major developments. First, Hurricane Miranda finally moved on, leaving behind 8 inches of standing water throughout Riverside Meadows. 12 homes had suffered significant flood damage, all of them owned by residents who'd supported my efforts or questioned Sarah's leadership. Second, Channel 7 News ran a feature story about our situation. Reporter Jessica Chen interviewed me while standing in front of my still blazing light display. "John, why did you decide to create this extraordinary lighting installation?" Jessica, when you've got an HOA president who cuts power to flood pumps during a hurricane, then retaliates against residents who try to help their neighbors, sometimes you need to make sure the whole community can see what's really going on. She turned to address the camera. "We've attempted to contact HOA President Sarah Owens for comment, but she hasn't responded to our calls." The story went viral within hours. By noon, Sarah was forced to call an emergency HOA board meeting, the first one in 3 months, where she couldn't control the agenda. The community center was packed. Every seat filled, people standing along the walls, others listening from the parking lot through open windows. Sarah tried to maintain control. "This meeting is to address the recent disruptions to our community's peaceful environment." But Tom Hartley had finally found his spine. "Sarah, before we discuss lighting displays, maybe we should talk about why our flood pump system failed during a hurricane." "The pumps were functioning within normal parameters," she insisted. That's when I stood up. "Sarah, I have documentation proving you canceled our maintenance contract with Hydrotech Industries 8 months ago. I also have sworn statements from 3 power company employees confirming you personally requested service disconnections to specific addresses during the storm." The room erupted. Neighbors started shouting questions, demanding explanations. "You cut our power," Mrs. Patterson yelled. "My basement is ruined because of you." Sarah's composure finally cracked. "I did what was necessary to maintain order. John Dale has been undermining my authority for months, turning residents against established procedures." "By helping people during a flood?" someone called out. "By violating HOA rules and encouraging others to do the same." That's when I played my trump card. "Sarah, would you like to explain to everyone where the $47,000 from our emergency maintenance fund actually went?" The room went dead silent. Sarah's face went white. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Because I have bank records showing transfers from the maintenance account to something called Aesthetic Improvements LLC, which appears to be a company owned by your husband." Tom Hartley was staring at Sarah like he'd never seen her before. "Sarah, is this true?" Those are legitimate community improvements. Like the $15,000 monument sign that nobody voted to approve? Or the $22,000 for landscape consultation that resulted in you replanting your own front yard? The meeting dissolved into chaos. Residents were shouting, demanding Sarah's resignation, calling for audits of all HOA finances. But I wasn't finished yet, because that night, my light display was about to become the least of Sarah's problems. The next morning, Sarah Owens woke up to find FBI agents on her doorstep. Turns out, when you embezzle nearly $50,000 from a homeowners association and then endanger lives during a natural disaster, certain federal agencies take an interest in your activities. I'd spent 3 months documenting everything: the canceled maintenance contracts, the financial transfers, the selective power shutoffs, and the systematic harassment of residents who opposed her decisions. But the FBI investigation revealed something far worse than petty corruption. Agent Rebecca Torres called me at 8 a.m. on November 18th. "Mr. Dale, we need to talk. Can you come to our field office this afternoon?" 2 hours later, I was sitting across from Agent Torres and a forensic accountant named David Kim. "John, your documentation was extremely helpful, but it led us to something much bigger. Sarah Owens isn't just embezzling from your HOA. She's been running similar schemes in 3 other communities." They showed me a chart connecting Sarah to management companies in California, Arizona, and Texas. The pattern was always the same: gain control of HOA boards, cancel essential maintenance contracts, redirect funds to shell companies, then disappear before anyone noticed. The flood pump situation was supposed to be her exit strategy, Agent Torres explained. Create a catastrophic failure. Blame it on hurricane damage, then use the insurance settlement to cover her tracks while she moved on to the next community. But I screwed up her timeline, I realized. Your light display and media attention made it impossible for her to claim the pump failure was weather-related. Plus, your documentation proved she deliberately sabotaged flood protection during a hurricane. That's a federal crime. David Kim leaned forward. John, we estimate she's stolen over $300,000 from various HOAs over the past 5 years. Your evidence is going to help us prosecute a major fraud case. But the best part was still coming. 2 days later, Sarah made a final, desperate attempt to regain control. She called another emergency meeting, claiming she had important announcements about community improvements and new security measures. This time, only about 30 people showed up, mostly her remaining supporters, who still believed her story about outside agitators disrupting neighborhood harmony. Sarah stood at the podium, looking haggard but defiant. Fellow residents, I want to address the recent attacks on my character and leadership. Certain individuals have been spreading false information. That's when Agent Torres walked into the room. Sarah Owens, you're under arrest for wire fraud, embezzlement, and criminal endangerment during a declared emergency. The meeting room went dead silent as they read her rights and led her away in handcuffs. But my favorite moment came 3 hours later. I was in my driveway, finally dismantling my epic light display now that it had served its purpose, when Tom Hartley approached me. John, I owe you an apology. I should have supported you months ago when this all started. Tom, you were trying to keep the peace. I understand that. No, it's more than that. I was scared of her. Sarah made it clear that anyone who opposed her would face retaliation. He paused, looking embarrassed. Actually, there's something you should know. That first violation notice about your mailbox? I voted against it. So did Janet Morrison and Mike Chen. But Sarah overruled us, claiming emergency presidential powers. I stared at him. She didn't have emergency powers. We know that now. Turns out half the bylaw changes she made were completely invalid. She never had authority to unilaterally impose fines or alter community standards. The next 6 months brought amazing changes to Riverside Meadows. With Sarah gone and the stolen money recovered through asset forfeiture, we hired a legitimate management company to handle HOA operations. The flood pump system was completely rebuilt with proper maintenance contracts and redundant backup systems. More importantly, we rewrote our community bylaws to prevent future power grabs. No single person can make unilateral decisions affecting homeowners. All financial transactions require board approval with detailed documentation. My mailbox? Still forest green. Turns out it was never actually non-compliant. The monument sign Sarah spent $15,000 on. We sold it and used the money to install a community garden where everyone can grow vegetables without architectural review harassment. And my house became something of a local legend. People still drive by to see where the guy with the crazy light display lives. Some even ask for advice when dealing with their own HOA problems. Sarah Owens was sentenced to 4 years in federal prison and ordered to pay $347,000 in restitution to the various communities she'd defrauded. She'll also never be allowed to serve on any HOA board again. During her sentencing hearing, Judge Patricia Valdez made a statement that I'll never forget. Miss Owens, homeowners associations exist to serve communities, not to provide opportunities for personal enrichment or power trips. Your abuse of authority and endangerment of residents during a natural disaster represents a betrayal of the most fundamental responsibilities of community leadership. 6 months after Hurricane Miranda, we faced another major storm, Hurricane Patricia, which brought even more rainfall than Miranda. This time, our flood pumps worked flawlessly. Every house stayed dry, and when the power went out due to actual storm damage, the entire neighborhood worked together, sharing generators and helping elderly residents until service was restored. That's what real community looks like. Sometimes people ask me if I regret escalating the conflict with Sarah, if maybe I should have tried harder to work within the system. But here's the thing. There was no system. Sarah had destroyed every check and balance, eliminated every avenue for resident input, and created a dictatorship disguised as a homeowners association. When someone has that much power and uses it to hurt people, sometimes you have to get creative. Sometimes you have to light up the entire block to show everyone what's really happening. Sometimes the only way to restore democracy is to make it impossible to hide in the darkness. And sometimes, when an HOA Karen thinks she's broken you, they thought they'd broken me. They were wrong. Follow to see what they try next.